Chapter 4 of a Catechism of Familiar Things. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jonathan Horniblow. A Catechism of Familiar Things, their history, and the events which led to their discovery, by Benziger Brothers. Chapter 4. Cocoa, Toddy, Cherries, Bark, Cork, Cochineal, Cloves, Cinnamon, and Cassia. Of what form is the tree which bears those large nuts, called coconuts? It is tall and straight, without branches, and generally about 30 or 40 feet high. At the top are 12 leaves, 10 feet long and half a foot broad. Above the leaves grows a large excrescence in the form of a cabbage. Excellent to eat, but taking it off kills the tree. The cocoa is a species of palm. Is not the Indian liquor called Toddy produced from the cocoa tree? Yes. Between the leaves and the top arise several shoots about the thickness of a man's arm, which, when cut, distil a white, sweet, and agreeable liquor. While this liquor exudes, the tree yields no fruit, but when the shoots are allowed to grow, it puts out a large cluster or branch, on which the coconuts hang, to the number of 10 or 12. Distill, to let fall in drops. Exude, to force or throw out. How often does this tree produce nuts? 3 times a year, the nuts being about the size of a man's head, and of an oval form. Of what countries is it a native? Of Asia, the Indies, Africa, Arabia, the islands of the southern Pacific, and the hottest parts of America. What are the uses of this tree? The leaves of the tree are made into baskets. They are also used for thatching houses. The fibrous bark of the nut and the trunk of the tree are made into cordage, sails, and cloth. The shell into drinking bowls and cups. The kernel affords a wholesome food, and the milk contained in the shell a cooling liquor. From what country was the cherry tree first brought? From Syracuse, a city of Pontus in Asia, on the southern borders of the Black Sea, from which place this tree was brought to Rome, in the year of that city 680, by Lucilius. It was conveyed 120 years after into Great Britain, A.D. 55. What is the meaning of A.D.? A short way of writing Anno Domini, Latin words for in the year of our Lord. Who was Lucilius? A renowned Roman general. Is the wood of the cherry tree useful? It is used in cabinet making, for boxes, and other articles. What is bark? The exterior part of trees, which serves them as a skin or covering. Exterior, the outside. Does it not undergo some change during the year? Each year, the bark of a tree divides, and distributes itself 2 contrary ways. The outer part gives towards the skin, till it becomes skin itself, and at length falls off. The inner part is added to the wood. The bark is to the body of the tree what the skin of our body is to the flesh. Of what use is bark? Bark is useful for many things. Of the bark of willows and linden trees, ropes are sometimes made. The Siamese made their cordage of the cocoa tree bark, as do most of the Asiatic and African nations. In the East Indies, they made the bark of a certain tree into a kind of cloth. Some are used in medicines, as the Peruvian bark for quinine, others in dyeing, as that of the alder, others in spicery, as cinnamon, etc. The bark of oak in tanning, that of a kind of birch is used by the Indians for making canoes. What are canoes? Boats used by savages. They are made chiefly of trunks of trees dug hollow, and sometimes of pieces of bark fastened together. How do the savages guide them? With paddles or oars. They seldom carry sails, and the loading is laid in the bottom. Are not the savages very dexterous in the management of them? Yes, extremely so. They strike the paddles with such regularity that their canoes seem to fly along the surface of the water, at the same time balancing the vessels with their bodies to prevent their overturning. Dexterous, expert, nimble. Do they leave their canoes in the water on their return from a voyage? No, they draw them ashore, hang them up by the two ends, and leave them to dry. They are generally so light as to be easily carried from place to place. Were not books once made of bark? Yes, the ancients wrote their books on the barks of many trees, as on those of the ash and the lime tree, etc. Which part did they use? Not the exterior or outer bark, but the inner and finer, which is of so durable a texture that there are manuscripts written on it which are still extant, although more than 1,000 years old. Is it not used in manure? Yes, especially that of the oak, but the best oak bark is used in tanning. What is cork? A thick, spongy, external bark of the cork tree, a species of oak. There are two varieties of this tree, the broad-leaved and the narrow. It is an evergreen, and grows to the height of 30 feet. The cork tree attains to a very great age. Where is the tree found? In Spain, Italy, France, and many other countries. The true cork is the produce of the broadleaf tree. What are its uses? Cork is employed in various ways, but especially for stopping vessels containing liquid, and, on account of its buoyancy in water, in the construction of lifeboats. It is also used in the manufacture of life preservers and cork jackets. The greatest quantities are bought from Catalonia in Spain. The uses of cork were well known to the ancients. What are its uses? Cork is employed in various ways, but especially for stopping vessels containing liquids, and, on account of its buoyancy in water, in the construction of lifeboats. It is also used in the manufacture of life preservers and cork jackets. To what particular use did the Egyptians put it? They made coffins of it, lined with a resinous composition, which preserved the bodies of the dead uncorrupted. What is cochineal? A drug used by the dyers for dyeing crimsons and scarlets, and for making carmine, a brilliant red used in painting and several of the arts. Is it a plant? No, it is an insect. The form of the cochineal is oval. It is about the size of a small pea, and has 6 legs armed with claws, and a trunk by which it sucks its nourishment. What is its habitation? It breeds in a fruit resembling a pear. The plant which bears it is about 5 or 6 feet high. At the top of the fruit grows a red flower, which, when full blown, falls upon it. The fruit then appears full of little red insects, having very small wings. These are the cochineals. How are they caught? By spreading a cloth under the plant and shaking it with poles till the insects quit it and fly about, which they cannot do many minutes, but soon tumble down dead into the cloth, where they are left till quite dry. Does the insect change its colour when it's dead? When the insect flies, it is red. When it is fallen, black. And when it is first dried, it is greyish. But afterwards it changes to a purplish grey, powdered over with a kind of white dust. From what countries is the cochineal bought? From the West Indies, Jamaica, Mexico, and other parts of America. What are cloves? The dried flower buds of the clove tree, anciently a native of the Moluccas, but afterwards transplanted by the Dutch, who traded in them, to other islands, particularly that of Ternate. It is now found in most of the East Indian islands. Describe the clove tree. It is a large, handsome tree of the myrtle kind. Its leaves resemble those of the laurel. Though the clove tree is cultivated to a great extent, yet so easily does the fruit on falling take root that it multiplies itself in many instances without the trouble of culture. The clove, when it first begins to appear, is white, then green, and at last hard and red. When dried it turns yellow, and then dark brown. What are its qualities? The clove is the hottest and most acrid of aromatic substances, one of our most wholesome spices, and of great use in medicine. It also yields an abundance of oil, which is much used by perfumers and in medicine. Acrid, of a hot, biting taste. Aromatic, fragrant, having an agreeable odour. What is cinnamon? An agreeable aromatic spice, the bark of a tree of the laurel kind. The cinnamon tree grows in the southern parts of India, but most abundantly in the island of Ceylon, where it is extensively cultivated. Its flowers are white, resembling those of the lilac in form, and are very fragrant. They are borne in large clusters. The tree sends up numerous shoots, the 3rd or 4th year after it has been planted. These shoots are planted out, when nearly an inch in thickness. How is the bark procured? By stripping it off from these shoots after they've been cut down. The trees planted for the purpose of obtaining cinnamon throw out a great number of branches, apparently from the same root, and are not allowed to rise higher than 10 feet, but in its native uncultivated state the cinnamon tree usually rises to the height of 20 or 30 feet. How is the cinnamon tree cultivated? By seed, sown during the rains, from shoots cut from large leaves, and by transplanting old stumps. The cinnamon tree, in its wild state, is said to be propagated by means of a kind of pigeons that feed on its fruit, in carrying which to their nests the seeds fall out, and dropping in various places take root, spring up, and become trees. Propagated, spread, extended, multiplied. What else is obtained from this tree? The bark, besides being used as a spice, yields an oil highly esteemed, both as a medicine and as a perfume. The fruit, by boiling, also produces an oil, used by the natives for burning in lamps. As soon it hardens, it becomes a solid substance like wax and is formed into candles. Camphor is extracted from the root. Cassia is a cinnamon of an inferior kind. End of chapter 4.